I didn't know much about Oberlin. I knew it was a smaller college, and I knew it was going to be cold here, which is why I wore my warmest jean jacket. I was invited to talk about the It Gets Better project. We can then talk about whatever the students who cared to show up want to talk about. We can talk about It Gets Better project, talk about gay teens, talk about youth suicide, and we can talk about dirty, dirty sex stuff. So I'm going to give a little speech and walk you through how the It Gets Better project came to be and some of the thoughts behind it. And then we will shift to a Q&A, and we can Q&A about the It Gets Better project or about whatever you guys would like to Q my A about. You know, I think you have a responsibility in college to get an education. I think each of us has a responsibility to leave, I call it the campsite rule. I usually apply it to sex, but it applies to everything. To leave it in a little better shape than you found it, to leave the world in a little better shape than you found it, should be all of our missions. I don't think the weight of the world is on the shoulders of college students, but I do think that college students have to get an education and set about cleaning up the goddamn campsite. Universities are often on the forefront of social change because young people make demands, and young people are often less bigoted in almost every respect than the previous generation or generations. Universities were the first places that had anti-discrimination ordinances that covered LGBT kids because student bodies demanded it. Laboratories of democracy, right? That's what they call the states. And for the states, I think college campuses are the laboratories of democracy. There's nothing about the It Gets Better project that excuses or precludes or excuses us from doing more. I don't come across as the kind of gay person you can yell at and quote a passage from the Bible and I'm going to burst into tears and accept Jesus as my Savior and come around. And when they have shown up, the conservative fundamentalist Christian kids lose the argument with me. So they're not anxious to show up and have that argument. There are, sometimes queer radicals show up who think that I'm too conservative sexually, or that, the problem with me is that I'm a thin, privileged, rich, white gay man, which is hilarious. But it's not quite fair to bitch slap me now when I'm investing a lot of time and energy on email every day trying to figure out how to resolve this. If I'm the enemy, our movement has much bigger problems than we think. So let's talk to these kids that we haven't been allowed to talk to or given permission to talk to or an invitation to talk to. These kids, many of whom are denied access to LGBT role models or adults. Things are never going to be perfect. There will always be bigotry, there will always be hatred, there will always be discrimination, there will always be backsliding. The measure of progress, and whether there's been any progress, whether it has gotten better, isn't, do we live in nirvana and is everything just ducky now? The right wing's idea is that we can't risk any social progress because our society is so fragile that it'll collapse if we free the slaves, if we give women the vote, if we pass the Civil Rights Act, if we pass ERA, which we should have passed, if we stop discriminating against gay people. Oh my God, the sky will fall. And the sky never falls. We end slavery and the sky doesn't fall. We have 100 years of Jim Crow and we have a civil rights movement, we pass the Civil Rights Act, the sky doesn't fall. We give women the vote, the sky doesn't fall. The lefty myth is that there's been no progress because there are still racists in the world and we can point to incidents of racial bias and hiring or discrimination or even hate crimes. Then we have to run around saying, oh, there's been no social progress. And that is bullshit. That's as much bullshit as saying that we can't risk any to say there has been none. What we need to say as lefties is look at all the progress and the sky hasn't fallen. So your argument now that if we take this step, the sky will fall, it has no more, we shouldn't take it seriously anymore at this point. The state of Wyoming, not a particularly blue state, not a particularly liberal state, prosecuted the men who murdered Matthew Shepard with the same vigor that they would have prosecuted two men who murdered a nun in a similarly gruesome fashion. They put them on trial for their lives and went for the death penalty, and both those pieces of shit are going to be in prison for the rest of their lives now. 20 years ago, when I was a college student, all those guys would have had to say is, he made a pass at me. And they wouldn't have been indicted. And had they been indicted, they wouldn't have been found guilty. They would have walked by using the gay panic defense. So even in something as dark and as horrible as Matthew Shepard's murder, which was proof that there are still people who hate out there, there was tremendous evidence of social progress. Because the measure of society is not, is it hate-free? The measure is how does the culture and how society respond? It gets better. Make a video. And do more. There are some people who criticize the It Gets Better project and say that the videos aren't enough. And I completely agree with them. Videos aren't enough, but videos are something. And for some queer kids who are in horrifying circumstances, videos are all we can do for them right now, reaching out to them using social media. So there's something, and I appreciate Oberlin's participation.